We're doing well. We're doing well because yesterday I saw you tweet an emoji of a pensive face, quote tweeting a picture of Tyrann Mathieu, on which Tyrann commented with two flame emojis, a picture of Tyrann Mathieu in a Saints uniform. Is this realistic at all? Let's just start there.
Sure, I think it could be realistic. I mean, it depends what they do with their other players. Like if Marcus Williams were to depart, I think it becomes a little bit more realistic for sure. And look, he's an explosive player, a playmaker, somebody that I think would fit really well into this Dennis Allen defense. He's smart, and I think he just has a lot of the traits that they really like in their safeties. So depending on how things kind of shake out here, I wouldn't be overly surprised. I kind of feel like at other times too, behind the scenes, it just kind of felt like there was interest. Both parties, actually. I mean, so it's a matter of everything lining up and all that. But I mean, I think he's the type of player that could come in here and be another really good piece in a defense that's going to be required to carry this team this year. But how things play out, I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Well, okay, and then let's talk about things playing out. Earlier, we talked about Tyrann Armstead and Marcus Williams, and the Saints basically saying at the Combine that, look, they're going to let these guys hit the open market and let the market kind of dictate where the conversation goes from there. Is your read on it? Like, are the Saints prepared to let both of these guys walk?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I think they are. If they go out and they hit the market and Marcus Williams is $16, $17 million a year, I think he's definitely out of here. I don't think that they'll make that push to try to keep him. I think they'd like to have him back for sure, but just not at that price range. And the fact that they're unwilling to tag him, at least from everything we've heard until 9 a.m. this morning, that can always change as the deadline comes up. But there seems to be an unwillingness to do that, to keep him, at a I think it's like somewhere like $13 million.
Yeah.
If you're unwilling to do that, I mean, you're talking a number way higher. It's a major difference. So I think it's very likely that he moves on. And same thing with Armstead. I just don't think that they want to pay him 20, 21, even $19 million a year. Again, another player that I think they would love to have back. I mean, he's been a great leader for him and all that, but when you manage the cap the way they manage it, I mean, that room for error is just, it's gone. It dissipates. And with a guy like Tyrann, if you pay him at that point, is that tight, and you're doing this maneuvering every year, the guys that you're spending on got to be on the field. They got to play. And if you're taking that $20 million, you're putting it on this guy, and he's playing 12, 13 games a year, I mean, it takes away your ability to compete. And I think, Mike Thomas being out 2 years in a row, you saw the effect of that on their offense. When you're spending like they are, you got to hit where your dollars are going.
Yeah.
And if you aren't hitting, it causes problems. So I think he's going to hit the market, and I'd be shocked if somebody doesn't want to pay him at the top of the league. If you got that flexibility and you can have the expensive contingency plan and you can pay him $20 million, I think he's a finishing piece for a lot of teams, one of the best players in the league, honestly. But it's just, I think where the Saints are at, it's a little bit harder to manage that a little bit. So I think both those guys very realistically could be playing for other teams next year.
Nick, we were talking earlier about, you draft guys, you get them into rookie contracts, and we brought up Peyton Turner and kind of where he's at in his Saints career. Obviously, played only a handful of games, was injured, only had one sack a year ago. What's the future plans for a guy like Peyton Turner? Obviously, he's a guy that's sitting behind two really good players. Do we see him kick inside more? Where do you see his Saints future?
He needs to get better quick, and it's not even, I don't even know if better is the right word, just he needs to be available quick. Yeah. And we need to be able to see what he can do to kind of gauge what he's going to be moving forward. But look, again, another one, at some point you're going to have to look at Cam Jordan's contract and decide if it's time to just let it play out and start taking on some of the money that's been kicked down the road and clear that contract from the books. I mean, you can't keep pushing when a guy's 33, 34 years old. So you draft a Peyton Turner to come in behind him. You have the cheap replacement. That's the contingency plan. He's got to show it going forward. And, I think they still believe that there's a world of talent there. I think they kind of look at him as being on that Marcus Davenport development plan where the runway, it's a ways to go. I think they expected him to be a little bit better early on than Davenport was, but there is patience there for him to get to where he needs to be, but he does have that flexibility that you mentioned too, playing inside, outside, and having him out there playing on the field, I think makes everything just easier and better. And everything goes hand in hand too. If you lose Marcus Williams and you get him, they'll have to get another safety. But if you lose Marcus Williams, your next safety isn't quite as good. If your pass rush is marginally better because your first round picks out there playing and doing damage, it can help cover up some of those, differences in the back end. So it's something that needs to happen quick, though. And really, their draft classes from the last few years, I mean, there's a lot to be desired still, and there's room for those guys to change that narrative. But a guy not playing, Cesar Ruiz kind of being what he is, and it sounds like they're still confident in him to figure things out. I don't think they're going to try to replace him or anything this offseason. But I mean, both those guys, I think there's a lot riding on them as this team goes forward, and they got to fill in these other holes. They need the pieces that are in place to have significant investment to be better than they have been the last couple of years.
Yeah, and the Ruiz piece I was going to ask you about, but I feel like you just answered it as well. So they're still going to stick with him and Doug Marrone.
But what is wild, though, is when you look at the first-round picks, I mean, you're right, Ruiz and Turner have kind of struggled. You're trying to get them on the field and trying to stay healthy in a couple of cases and find out which position they're best at. But they've hit on the later-round picks. I mean, Pete Warner and Paulson Adebo, I mean, they've done a really nice job, Nick. They're in the second and the third rounds, and they've hit on some picks. They just got to get that first-round pick right, it feels like, because obviously that's where you want to have the for sure starter that plays 17 games and starts all 17 games, and you can count on him.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this year's huge for that too. Just with all the stuff they got to do on offense, I think it's imperative that they find that guy early on and they don't miss on him again, or it's not, it's a guy with a ton of development time.
Right.
Just draft a guy to play the position that he played in college. Let him go out there and do what he does and hit the ground running. But yeah, I agree with you on Pete Warner. I think the emergence of him is, one of the reasons why they should. And I was saying this last year, and I think it's actually true this year. If they bring Quan Alexander back, great, strength on his strength. But I think he's someone you let test the market. And the way he played, he probably prices out. You got to trust your second round pick to come in and handle those snaps. And he looked like, in the snaps he played last year, I think he's extremely ready.
Yeah.
And Adebo too, you're right, definitely hit there. I wonder how much they is it to the point that you let Bradley Roby go, or do you bring him back? I mean, I wonder if there's a little bit of wondering if they were riding a wave there, and they're still waiting to see if the sample size weighs out. Because look, I mean, sometimes that happens with corners, and it's an extremely hard position for guys to maintain their level of play. I mean, even like an Eli Apple or Ken Crawley, they can hit a season, ride a wave, and then the next year it's just, okay, now that you got 60 passes coming his direction, it kind of, shakes out a little bit and you see what he really is. So I'm going to be interested to see how they approach corner. If they believe in Adebo, I mean, I think you let Roby go. If you don't, if there's some doubt, if you just want to make sure, I could see them, trying to find a way to pay him and keep him around.
And so you mentioned letting Roby go. I think that brings about a cap saving of like $9 or $10 million just off the bat. And so does your hand almost feel a little more, I don't know if force is the right word, but like if you lose Tyrann Armstead, what is he, $13 million in dead money here? Yeah. And is that a commentary, that $13 million, is that a commentary on the idea of voidable years and maybe not being so good, or is that just a part of the design and eventually you have to have paydays for kind of these individual players in that way? You just hope that they don't all line up at once.
It's just, I mean, that's by design. When these guys go, you got to pay the money at some point. And it's, there's $12.9 million on Tyrann, but when you go out and you sign, whoever, Honey Badger, just to use a random name. If you go out and you sign Honey Badger, you just structure his deal.
You do the same thing.
12.9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you put 12.9 in a roster bonus a year from now, so you aren't paying him the $12.9 million this year. He still gets his money, and that's just kind of how you do it. You just got to keep stacking it. So, I mean, that's the thing that people always say, oh, well, they're still paying Drew Brees. Well, okay, they aren't paying $5 million to another guy. But, I do think at some point they're going to let off the gas a little bit. They're at 180 miles per hour with Brees trying to win the Super Bowl. I do think that at some point they're going to let off the gas a little bit, let some of this money clear and kind of level out a little bit and just, get to a point where it's not every contract has to have voidable years. I think that they do want to live a little bit of a cleaner life, but I don't ever think they're going to be a team that gets Andrew Brandt's approval. or these other people that love to criticize what they do, they're always going to be aggressive. But I think there's probably a way to be a little bit less aggressive, clear the stuff out, remain competitive, and just kind of get to a more balanced place where it just isn't so tight to the point where your decisions are being made through the prism of, can this go wrong and can we survive? And that's kind of how I think they look at things right now. And there needs to be a little bit more breathing room just to have that room for risk and margin of error.
Nick Underhill. Nick, Boy Meets World or Saved by the Bell?
Oh, Boy Meets World all the way.
Let's go, dude.
Why didn't you ask Coach Mulkey that?
That's a good question. I must have forgotten. All right, Nick, thank you so much, man. You have a great day.
Yeah, take it easy, guys.
Some fascinating insight from Nick and the house. Interesting to hear, because Nick's he's kind of a cap truther in that he understands it better than most do talking about it, and so he kind of lays out what the things going. But even he's saying, maybe now that you're not in that Super Bowl window, like you're still in a good window, like you can win games, but maybe do let off the gas a little bit, and you don't have to go so all in on pushing these cap shenanigans to the limit. But yeah, I guess that's right? How do you make up for the $13 million for Tyrann this year? If you want to sign Honey Badger, you should do the same thing, and then you answer that question down the road then.